Welcome to Bible 325, the life, mission, and teaching of Jesus Christ. I'm so excited that you've joined us, and we continue through the course. We're going to be looking at the lessons and the notes entitled Jesus is the Messiah. So if you want to get those notes, pause the video, get those notes. That will help you as we go through this. The main text we're going to be using is Matthew chapter 16, verses 13 through 20. Also, if you would like to take this time to pause the video and read through Matthew 16 again and just get the flavor of what Matthew is recording here. Matthew 16, verses 13 through 20. And I'll read it, and we will begin our discussion on Jesus is the Messiah. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, You, emphatic in the Greek, you are the Messiah, the Mashach, the anointed one, the sent one, the Son of the living God. Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he ordered his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. Now, the Messiah, the anointed one, the sent one. The Messiah was the expected hero in the Old Testament. He was the superhero, basically, who would come and deliver Israel. He was the hope, the expectation of Israel. He would come and take away Rome's oppression. All of this. This is who Jesus is. And the Messiah was predicted in the Old Testament. He would have signs and wonders following him. And here we're going to see Peter's declaration about Jesus. Jesus is emphatically the Messiah. This is the pivot point of Jesus' ministry. Once again, Jesus is outside of Galilee, and now he's in Caesarea Philippi. Caesarea Philippi. Now, Caesarea Philippi was an ancient center of worship of the Greek god Pan. The city, Paneas, had also been renamed in honor of the emperor and of Herod Philip. So, where more appropriate than Caesarea Philippi to determine if Jesus' followers understood his true divine identity. His true divine identity. So right in like the worship capital, the center, Jesus is saying, "Who am I? What are the people saying about me? What's the word on the street?" And then they give off these names, this and this, but Jesus says, "Okay, that's fine. But what about you guys? Who do you say that I am?" And Peter said, "You are the Son, you are the Messiah, the Son of God." In short compass and in sharp juxtaposition to each other, Peter expressed the high and the low points of his Christological understanding and their disciples. On one hand, Peter says that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. He's the Messiah. He's the one we're looking for. He is the prophesied one. And in context, this is an improvement on the belief that Jesus was just merely one of the prophets. So Jesus is wanting to say, and I think, he's asking his disciples, he's asking us, who am I in your life? Who am I? Who is Jesus in your life? And they list John the Baptist, Elijah, Jeremiah. But Jesus says, who am I? And then Peter, who is usually the spokesman for the disciples, just blurts out, Su e ha Christos ha. Huios tu theou tu zontas. You, emphatically, are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Think about this. This is a pivotal moment here. Jesus is getting ready to start shifting towards the cross. And his disciples are now realizing who he is. Isn't it amazing that a lot of us have been with Jesus for years? We've been Christians for years. We've been saved for years. But we still do not understand his true identity. We do not understand who Jesus is, and that is sad. We must make every effort to get to know him, build that intimate relationship with him. So it was a divinely revealed insight. Jesus says, my Father, flesh and blood, humans, these people didn't reveal this to you, but what you just said, Peter, came from revelation from my Father. And the disciples, they got it. Jesus says that he will build his church, his ecclesia, on this rock. In the original Greek, it makes little sense to take the rock as anything but Peter himself. And so there's a play on words. You are a rock, Petros, and on this rock, Petra. Peter just told Jesus who he is. Now, Jesus is telling Peter who he is. You are a small piece, a small fragment of this giant rock. And on the other hand, although Peter seems to grasp something of Jesus' unique relationship with God, he was not prepared for a suffering Messiah, which was predicted. And so Jesus silences him because Peter cannot handle the fact that their Messiah is going to be beaten. Their Messiah is going to be slaughtered. As Jesus predicts his death again, he says, I have to suffer many things in Jerusalem. I will be killed, and on the third day I will rose again. Verse 22, Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Never, Lord, this shall never happen to you. Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. So here Jesus is predicting his death, and Peter's like, no, 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 no. We cannot have our Messiah, our ruler, die like this. Because they thought that the Messiah was going to come in, whoosh, clean house. But Jesus comes in meek. He comes in humbly. He comes in lowly. And that's how he does. So, when we're looking at this and we're thinking, you think about the different prophecies that Jesus fulfilled, the different signs that he did to show his messiahship. He healed the lame. He gave sight to the blind. He fed 5,000 people. Who is this Jesus? Who is this Messiah? The one whose birth was predicted over 500, 800 years before he was born. We worship the Savior, the Christ, the Anointed One, who will make good on God's promises. And the thing is, we can't get discouraged, because the disciples have been with Jesus for some time, but yet they still did not fully grasp who he was. And I think once we mentally, spiritually begin to understand who God truly is, we'll never do big things for him, because we have to understand that Jesus didn't come just to heal you of a hangnail or a stubbed toe or anything like that. Jesus came to save your soul from a dying hell. So when we look at this passage, we're seeing that Jesus always does things opposite of what we expect. They expected Jesus to come in saddles blazing, but no, Jesus comes in wrapped in burial clothes and in linens, and laid in a manger, laid in a feeding trough. The bread of life placed here so that whoever eats of the bread of life will live in heaven for eternity. Don't miss out on eternity. Don't miss out. Because God is working and he's moving. We understand that Jesus has to silence Peter in order for Jesus himself to go in and start teaching various things. Now, when we look at passages like Isaiah 44 to the end of the book, we see that God always has a remnant. God always works best with small groups, small members, places where the word is going out. Jesus asked the disciples a question, and I believe he's asking us, who am I in your life? And we come to that realization that Jesus is the Messiah. So, when we look at these passages, we know the Transfiguration is coming up in the next chapter when God peels back his humanity and lets his brilliance, divinity shine forth. That is what I want my ministry to be. We should want our ministry to be built on the fact that Jesus Christ is Lord, and that whatever he tells us to do, we're going to do it. So it's important to remember that at this crucial moment in Jesus' ministry, he finds the time to stop, perceive the situation, and ask the questions. Who do men say that I am? It is pivot on this messianic confession of Peter. Now it's interesting that Peter has all this zeal, this fire, this passion, but a few chapters later we see him cursing out a young girl because he did not get his jacket or whatever serviced. So we have to believe that Jesus is more than just a good man. He's more than just a prophet. He's more than just a good speaker. He really is the Son of God. God bless you in your studies. God bless you in your readings. Read Matthew chapter 16. Be blessed.